Utterly shameful. That's how the SNP's Stephen Flynn has described the Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer's refusal to commit to scrapping the two-child benefit cap. In an open letter to Sir Keir and the Scottish Labour leader Angus Sarwar, he's called on both to U-turn on the policy. Well, it appears that Angus Sarwar didn't need any encouraging. In this morning's Daily Record, he writes that Scottish Labour's opposition to the cap remains intact. Well, let's speak now to the SNP's Stephen Flynn. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
And I presume you welcome Angus Sarwar's position.
I mean, Angus Sarwar appears to be rubbing some brasso on his neck this morning because he is trying to con the people of Scotland into believing that he is against the policy when just yesterday on the television he was saying he backs Keir Starmer's position. The reality is that London Labour have given a diktat to the Scottish Labour leader that he needs to support their ridiculous and heinous position in relation to this policy, and Angus Sarwar has followed suit.
Well, he says that he will oppose it and he will campaign against it, so you're not taking his word for that then?
Well, there's a big difference between campaigning against something and then when you're in government having the power to get rid of something. Now, what Keir Starmer, who's the real power within the Labour Party, not Angus Sarwar, has said is that if his government comes to power next year, then they're not going to offer change to the people of Scotland. What they're going to do is continue with Tory austerity measures, George Osborne's austerity measures which across the UK are putting 250,000 children into poverty. Now, the cost of resolving this policy would be about £1.3 billion out of a budget of £1,189 billion.
So where would the money come from? Because when Labour call on the Scottish Government to do things, your colleagues in Edinburgh constantly say on this programme they need to tell us where the money's coming from. So where would that £1.3 billion come at a time when the country's facing a cost of living crisis?
Well, of course, what we're talking about here is about 1% of the overall social security budget. If Labour were to come into power at Westminster next year, they would have complete control over tax and spend right across the UK. So that there's many ways in which they could raise levies or indeed seek to grow the economy, perhaps by joining the European Union or inviting more migrants to come and live and work in Scotland.
Well, they're not going to join the European Union anytime soon, are they? So that's not going to help those families that you have just mentioned. Where specifically should this money come from if the money has to be found from somewhere?
So, Gary, the wider point I was making there was the fact that if the Labour Party want to grow the economy, there's obvious and really quick routes to do so, routes which they've rejected, which of course the people of Scotland support. I feel a trend coming on here in relation to that, but the reality is that right across the spectrum there's tax raising powers available to an incoming UK government to do that should they so wish, but they've decided that they don't want to do that. They want to continue with conservative policies. Now, that's unforgivable, but the same thing applies to, free tuition, it applies to free school meals, it applies to the position, as we've just discussed there, in relation to the single market and freedom of movement. No matter which way we turn, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are hand in glove, but to do so on a policy like this, I think really cuts to the core of so many Scots, because we're talking about lifting kids out of poverty here. And if a Labour Party doesn't want to lift kids out of poverty, then what's the point of them?
But the reality is that Keir Starmer makes the point that he doesn't know what the economic situation will be until ultimately he sees the books, as it were, in the event of Labour winning an election. It is economically responsible, is it not, to not make rash promises that you cannot deliver on? Because your party in the past has made promises and manifestos that then it was recanted once in government.
Gary, I don't think it's, if I may, I don't think it's a rash policy to say that you're going to spend £1.3 billion to lift 250,000 children out of poverty.
But then people will ask him where the money comes from, and you're not able to say specifically where the money comes from. He won't be able to say that either, will he?
Well, perhaps you could. You could go into specifics if he so wished. So we could look at non-dom, we could look at taxing share buybacks, which would raise multi-billions worth of pounds. We could look at, reclaiming some of the money that was coined by businesses during the pandemic who ran off into the sunset. We could look at growing our economy in a positive way by joining the European Union, by inviting more migrants to work here to increase the tax base. The Labour Party doesn't want to do that. We've got this absurd position where you have the leader, the Labour supposed leader in Scotland, who's simply bowing down to what his London master says. And this goes to the heart of the general election next year. If people want change, then Labour aren't offering change. Real hope can only be offered by Scottish independence, where we won't have London-based politicians telling us what we can and can't do.
Some people might point to your attacks on Labour showing that you're nervous about what the opinion polls are suggesting might well happen to your party at the hands of Labour come the next election. And you mention independence there. Several of your MPs are standing down. They clearly don't believe that independence is imminent, otherwise they'd be staying to see it through, wouldn't they?
I'll come to that in a second, Gary, but on your point of supposed nerves in relation to the Labour Party, I'm sitting on your radio show this morning because the Labour Party is refusing to put in place measures, should they become a UK government, to lift 250,000 children out of poverty. Now, I guess the question for the people of Scotland would be, do they want members of Parliament who are going to seek to lift children out of poverty, or do they not? And I think the answer to that, I think we all know the answer to that, is that they do. And I'm not nervous at all. In fact, I'm confident that the people of Scotland will continue to put their faith in the Scottish National Party. Now, yes, some of my colleagues are stepping down. The likes of Stuart Hosey and Peter Grant have been elected members for decades, have contributed huge amounts to Scottish public life. I think they're more than entitled to go on.
And several are not in that position, including Mary Black, of course.
Well, yeah, of course, but I think Mary's been quite clear about her reasoning. She struggles with the toxic nature of Westminster, and I think that's understandable. And
how imminent is independence then for these people who are stepping down?
If I may just finish my comment on Mary, I think everyone's aware of the fact that Mary's stated her reasons as to why she's going, but I think that encourages us to have a wider conversation in society as to why the youngest politician in the best part of 300 years is walking away from Westminster. I think we need to be focusing on that rather than the fact that Mary's stepping away. But in terms of independence, I think it's quite clear that the onus lies very much with.
My question specifically was, how imminent is it?
Well, it'll be as imminent as the people of Scotland want it to be, Gary, because that's the important thing here. If the people of Scotland want something to happen, then it should happen. Now, of course, they voted for the Scottish National Party on the basis of being able to deliver a second independence referendum, and the UK government has blocked it. Now, whether
your colleague Angus McNeil says that your policy on independence is utterly clueless. What is his position within your party now?
So if I may just finish my previous answer, whether it's Rishi Sunak or indeed Keir Starmer, they're seeking to deny the people of Scotland their democratic will. That's where the real outrage should lie. And if this is a union of equals, Gary, then I think it's high time that they proved it. And of course, Keir Starmer's going to have to set out how the people of Scotland get to determine their future. In relation to Angus's position, I think it's well versed in the public domain that Angus chose not to return to the SNP whip. You don't get to pick and choose whether, no matter which party you're in, whether that's the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the few Lib Dems that there are, or indeed the SNP, when and if you hold the party whip. If you're a member of the party, you should be holding the party whip. Now,
so his refusal to rejoin the group means he can't be a member of the SNP?
So that's a matter which the party will now be determining through due process. Now, I wouldn't seek to influence that process. I think that would be quite unfair on Angus. I don't have any personal animosity towards Angus at all, as I'm sure he would testify to. I think he's a very colourful and lively character and a strong advocate for Scottish independence. And you know, Gary, you can disagree in life without being disagreeable, and I'm quite happy to continue on that basis with Angus.
Stephen Flynn, thank you very much for speaking to us. Of course, the SNP's Westminster leader there. And we will speak to the Deputy Leader of Scottish Labour, Jackie Baillie, after 8:30.